Welcome to The Storied Life. I'm your host and co-founder, Lana Jackson, and I'm joined by my sister and co-founder, Jilene Jackson.
Hey, everyone.
Today, we are interviewing Peggy Li, a former TV writer turned jewelry designer and founder of Peggy Li Creations. Peggy's handmade jewelry has been seen in print magazines like Teen Vogue, TV shows like Little Fires Everywhere, and Riverdale, amongst others, and various films for over 18 years. Welcome to The Storied Life, Peggy. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Lana and Jilene. So happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in. I think that it's really been a crazy time in our culture. I just feel like we're kind of living through a lot of cultural upheaval, and it can be really difficult, especially for creatives of color. So I kind of wanted to ask you to start, what are you doing in this time to stay creatively alive and motivated?
That's a really great question. I'm lucky enough to be able to work from home, and I've always sort of worked from home, so I haven't had to have that transition as we moved into shelter in place. But aside from that, I'm really lucky. I've been busy through this time, and I think it's because my business has always been online and had an online focus. So again, I didn't have a harsh transition from maybe being retail or doing a lot of in-person events and then having to sort of scramble and find a way to reach people while everybody is sheltering. In terms of staying creative, it's actually been good for me in the sense that I've been very busy, and that has motivated me to keep, being able to sort of create new product. It's also because suppliers had shut down and you're sort of cut off from your usual routines. I've sort of dived back into past collections and past designs, as well as sort of my gigantic bead stash. And I've been sort of, like what I like to say, shopping in my own closet and sort of reusing materials and things that I haven't revisited in quite some time. So that's been really interesting and really fun.
Yeah. I mean, I love the part about what you said about shopping in your closet. That's something that, I feel like it's something that we don't always take advantage of just going back through what we already have. And I think we're all in a mindset of being sustainable and trying to leverage what we have and what we can do with what we already have. And because we're at home, and it's such a great time to go back into that and to see, can I make something of what is already in my closet, or what, even if I'm crafting or doing something, can I make something with what I already have? So that's so awesome.
Definitely. You get a little more creative and a little more inventive and resourceful. In terms of the cultural upheaval we're experiencing right now, I think it's definitely eye-opening. And again, we have sort of time. Our lives are slowed down just a little bit, at least for me. And, it's given me a lot of time to sort of stop and reflect, especially in these past few days, of what else I can be doing that is reflected in, that can be driven by my business as well as be reflected by my business.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And definitely, I think we've been trying to stay creatively alive and motivated as well, just through catching up on storytelling. We love stories and watching TV shows and movies, and also on a journey towards self-care and self-love during this time. And speaking of love, wanted to know, where did your love for jewelry and handmade goods come from?
I think I've always been curious, if that makes sense, and interested in how things are made and where they come from, how things are put together. And I think, having a jewelry business sort of came about by accident. And I think in general, I like to think I'm a creative person, or I enjoy creative things. And jewelry just happened to be the mode of expression that ended up being a business for me, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. And I love that because that's sort of even the heart of the Storied Life and why we created it. Because to us, we value the journey behind how somebody came to making what they make. I think there's so much in retail that's dehumanizing, and so consumeristic. And I love that we can turn our attention to like the people, like the person, and like your journey and your love for creativity has found its home in making jewelry and stones and beads and things that people can adorn their bodies with. And that's just something to be celebrated and to inquire of, you know what I mean?
Thanks. I think that's a really great mission to have, because people have become so disconnected from where their food comes from, where where the objects in their life originate from and how they come to be. From a really practical standpoint, I think I was when, you're young and you're shopping and you see something that you like and you can't afford it. And I think the impulse was, okay, maybe I can make something like that for myself. And you go and you find out about, okay, how is that made? Can I do it? And then it becomes a challenge and you want to see what your creativity, what your skills can manifest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think how amazing that you have that inclination, because I think it could definitely go the other way. And I know we've all had those moments where, we see something that we love that's maybe, more aspirational than what we can afford. And there's an impulse to try to, try to afford that, or to save up money to buy it, or to put things on credit, instead of kind of going the other way that you went and saying, well, maybe I can make something like that. And I think that's a really beautiful inclination. And I kind of want to dive deeper into that. And one of the things that I can't wait to talk about, and I hope that people really enjoy hearing, is just your educational background is so different from from what you ended up doing in your life, though everything connects, like you get older and you realize like everything is like really connected to the story that you end up living. So I really want to kind of ask you to talk about like what it was like making the transition into a creative field from a science-based background, because I feel like so many people, and women especially, can relate to that. As women, you're told to kind of go to college or get a degree and, try to be that girl that has that job and has it all together. But so often what we study doesn't always translate the way we think it will into what we end up doing. So can you speak to that a little?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think for me, my story, it's tied really closely to the fact, my parents were immigrants to this country. They came over from Taiwan for their higher education. So grew up with Asian parents, and they, of course, really emphasized education. And my dad was an electrical engineer, and my mom had a chemistry background. So they were both scientists, and that's what they dreamed of for their children. So I think I really as a kid, I really wanted to take on that legacy, right, and perpetuate that for my parents. And I felt there was a lot of pressure, and later on I realized it was a lot of pressure I was just putting on myself, which isn't to say I didn't love science and enjoy, those fields. But I also, like I said, I also was very interested in creative arts, English and writing, and studying all sorts of things. And today I like to say, like, jack of all trades, master of none. Mm-hmm. But I did, go on to college with pursuing a science degree. But at the same time, I really tried to if I had any extra hours, to fill it with things that I wanted to do, like a screenwriting class or other, creative literature classes, and just get that. I always sort of wanted to, taste it, try it, find out what really was right for me. And I think eventually that side sort of just won out at the end of the day. And when I realized, and when my parents sort of, not gave me permission, but I realized that they were just there for me and they wanted me to be successful in whatever that meant. And I was so lucky that they were there to support me, financially, as well as, not disowning me for not doing what I thought they wanted me to do. That I was able to sort of go and I had some space and freedom to, after I did graduate from college with a science degree, but after that to go and pursue something on the creative side, which was at the time I went and moved to Los Angeles to be an intern at a movie studio. And I love that you said I was a TV writer. I was not, but I wanted to be.
That's okay. The intention was there.
The intention was there.
No, I love that you just said all of that because, I mean, that's something Jilene and I can definitely relate to. Our parents are immigrants and we're first generation. Our parents are from Guyana, which is in South America. It's next to Venezuela. And, I think a lot of people don't always understand the journey of being like the child of immigrants. And it's something that's definitely in the culture now to kind of like it's in the discourse, but it wasn't always that way. And those expectations that your parents have for you to want you to have more than they had, or just to be able to experience things that they couldn't. And our father is actually an electrician, so similar background. And so I love that you allowed yourself to be free to explore, what else was calling you. And sometimes the courage to do that, coming from where we come from, isn't always easy, and I love that your parents supported you and were there for you. And our parents are the same way. At the end of the day, they just love their kids, and they want their children to be happy. And it's clearly availed so much for you. So thank you for taking us into that a little bit and letting people know, like, it's okay to try new things,
Yeah, it's definitely it was definitely very difficult for me to sort of allow that side and try and, so for a long time I balanced both, right? I tried to do it all. I did graduate with my science degree, even though I was also, I also wished I could take other classes that I wanted to do. So it was tough, but and my parents did express, their concerns and that they were worried. And but at the end of the day, I realized it was as much pressure on myself as it was perceived from my family.
Yeah, definitely. Pressure from family. And I think sometimes we even forget that there can be pressure from society as well. I think there's somehow this like unspoken rule that, when you go to college to study, that you just study, this one particular subject, and that it's okay to explore other subjects and things that you might be interested in, and to leave room kind of in your life and in your career for moving into another field that you're interested in, or pursuing another passion or goal.
The idea of a real job, sorry to interrupt you, but
go for it.
Right, that pressure of like, what's a real job, that you need to get some sort of real job at the end of school or college or whatever form of education you've taken. And that being said, I still had, many a day job before being full-time in my business, which I am now. So it took a long time to get rid of those handcuffs, or to really feel confident to transition fully.
Yeah, that's well said.
Definitely. And I think that's so encouraging to me, Peggy, like on a personal level, because it is hard to get rid of those handcuffs. I love fashion. We write for this blog and we enjoy talking to people like you about their stories. But it's like one part of things that I love. I actually work at the Pentagon as a financial analyst and have done that for some time, though I have a degree in art history and fashion design. And I also, for the longest time in my life, we are lovers of stories. It is like the greatest love of our souls. And in this season, I'm allowing myself to study acting, to pursue that on top of everything. And, it seems bizarre to everybody else, like what you said about like you're taking screenwriting classes and you're studying, a science-based background, and you love all this jewelry that you would find. And it seems bizarre to everybody else, but it really does make perfect sense. And it's such an encouragement to my soul to hear you say, like, the handcuffs did come off. Eventually, I was able to give myself fully to the thing that really makes my soul stand on tiptoe. So I just, you have no idea like how much that really means to both of us.
And I have to say, in some ways, the restraints and the challenges of trying to balance those things, I think really helped. I can't imagine him, looking back, doing it in a different way. And I think it really helped me focus on what I wanted to do and allowed my business to grow slowly and organically. And I didn't have certain pressures on the business to succeed, which really allowed it to be very enjoyable.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause it's like you have so many like things going on that you don't have to, it's not an all or nothing. And it makes for a much more richer, like, journey, whether that's, making jewelry or, becoming an actor or whatever, cause it's not your all. And then you just become like, what's the word? You just become, like you said, like this jack of all trades.
Well, there's no shame in the day job game, I will say. There's no shame.
No,
absolutely. And speaking of your day job and kind of building this business that you have, how would you describe Peggy Li Creations to someone who has never heard of your brand?
I would say it's a small handmade jewelry company, and I love making simple, feminine jewelry designs with a modern edge.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I love how everything feels so delicate, but it feels very contemporary. And all of your pieces really, they're so wearable. And I'm not like a flashy jewelry person. I love getting dressed up. Obviously, I love fashion, but I think that I love that jewelry can just kind of be understated and provide like a level of elegance, but it's still casual enough for me to like wear with like a white button up and some cut off shorts. Like it can have that kind of broad range to it. So I love that the way that you describe that. When it comes to your designs, like where do you draw your inspiration from? And is there like an aesthetic philosophy that you're particularly drawn to?
I think my aesthetic philosophy is that it's something simple, and I want it to be wearable. And I like to say that, people, my customers wear the jewelry, it doesn't wear them. So even if I always find if I'm trying to make something that in my mind, I want it to be a little more complex and ornate or whatever, in the end, I usually end up paring things down and editing it down to something simpler. Like I said, my business sort of grew organically because I still had a day job for a lot of the time I was running my business, which also I think, I don't have strict collections. I don't release product on a regular, like a regular fashion label might, and so I'm a little less disciplined in the sense that I'm not developing full collections. I sort of make as I go or when I have the time. So I feel like my stuff can be a little all over the place, but again, I'm grateful to have that freedom just to explore. If some design aesthetic is intriguing me at the moment, I sort of get to go down that path a little bit and explore that and explore sort of what I'm into at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely love the creativity and like freedom behind creating out of what you are feeling like passionate about or inspired by right now. Definitely don't think it's all over the place. I think it would suit, any woman's style or choices. Like my sister said, she's a little bit more minimal in her jewelry choices. I, as a fashion person, I really love those like statement like jewelry pieces that really pop, call out attention to. And I've seen a few of your pieces like that. And so it's definitely cool that you have some pieces, in a sense, like you said, all over the place that kind of would fit with any particular woman's style. And I also heard you said that some of your process seems to be editing down. And I wanted to talk more about just kind of exploring like what your design process is like. How do you decide on like various styles or stones or gems or metals for each piece? Is everything made by you, or do you have like other artisans also who are helping you?
Everything is made by me, and I'm using, it's a small business. I'm using a combination of like components that I source in addition to pieces I'm fabricating myself. But, it's like beadwork and chains and components. And, it's that balance between making something and designing something. But that's part of the fun of this kind of jewelry business. I think, you can make things quick. I get to iterate really quickly and take inspiration from the materials I'm able to get and the materials I acquire. So a lot of the design inspiration comes from what are the stones that I have on hand? What are the shapes of these stones that I'm finding? I think I'm really drawn to geometric shapes. I also really love fine art and historical art. So that often is an inspiration. But at the end of the day, it's usually the materials themselves that are inspiring. So, for example, right now I'm kind of into these 2D geometric shapes. So I've just been sort of iterating on like circles and ovals and triangles and in sort of really flat matte shapes is what I'm into. And so just, when I do something, have that idea, it's really fun just to have pieces on a table, and you just move them around and combine them in different ways until it looks right.
And that's the design process. Like it's pure iteration and almost looking at something and allowing it to be, what it is and tweaking that. That's so interesting. And like, where do you find stones? Like if you wanted to make like something with jade or turquoise, like where do you go to look for those things?
I now go to wholesale shows. Like you can find gem shows around the country where vendors will come and bring all their stuff. And I think, just starting out, I started out at like a bead store, but nowadays you can find so much stuff online, as well as there are these, like I said, these moving shows that come every quarter to different towns, different cities, and have just a collection of vendors. And over the years now, there are vendors that I tend to go to over and over again that specialize in bringing, creating beads and things for businesses and crafters. So they usually have everything you could ever want.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I know like in my time, like studying fashion design, we used to learn about like all the trade shows and places where you can, find different pieces or different designers or materials, but I never thought about it from the world of jewelry design. So that's really interesting. Are most of those like in California or LA, or do you travel ever abroad to find those?
I've traveled before in the past. I mean, there's a huge jewelry district in New York. There's one in LA as well. Every year there's a huge sort of gem show that happens in Tucson, Arizona. It's sort of known within the jewelry industry, where all sort of the East Coast and West Coast vendors all sort of descend on Tucson at the beginning of the year, around February, January. And that's always a huge event. I've been once, but it would be amazing to travel to source things. But at the same time, you can really sort of find so much just by looking around locally or attending these shows, and these vendors are always there to get whatever you want, really.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure really great too, to be able to source those things from within the US. So that's really awesome. So like when we were reading about you and just sort of your journey, you had mentioned that there was like this meeting or just chance encounter you had with a costume designer that kind of helped your jewelry to land on, the hit shows that we now see all of your stuff on. So I just wanted to know, like, what was that moment like? Was it serendipitous? Was it sort of the way you kind of network and kind of find people who like have similar vision and align with you? Just kind of wondering if you can take us into like what that moment was like for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say it's a very LA moment. So I was living and working in Los Angeles. I was working as a writer and for a teen focused website. And I was sort of their pop culture editor at the time. And so, which again, because I had an interest in being a TV writer and, living in LA, living the LA life, I was like, hey, I want to write about stuff that I'm into and I'm interested in. And at the time, the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a big show. And I loved that show. And I was like, how do I get in to meet someone on the show? I want to get, an interview with someone there. And I loved the fashion on the show. So I'm like, hey, why don't I talk to the costume designer? That would be really fun and find out like where Buffy gets her clothes. And, I was interested in that answer. And I got an interview with her. And it turned out she was from the same hometown I'm from, Santa Rosa. And I was making jewelry on the side for fun for myself. At that time, when I walked around town, people would go, where'd you get that jewelry? People were really interested in it. And so after that interview, the interview was over and I had left, and I thought to myself, hey, maybe I should send some jewelry over to Cynthia and see what she thinks. And I literally, wrote a letter dropped a few samples in it and mailed it off to her and didn't think about it after that. And that was like 20 years ago. So my memory's a little hazy, but I think, I feel like weeks went by and then I get a phone call and it's an assistant from the costume design department. And they're like, hey, Peggy, Cynthia really loved your pieces. What else do you have? Send everything else that you have. And I was like, okay, sent that in. And then again, days go by, weeks go by, and I get a phone call and it's the costume department. And they're like, hey, Peggy, just so you know, we gave your name to a reporter from USA Today and she's probably going to be calling you. Like, okay. So the reporter calls me and it's like, hey, we're writing up about the next season of Buffy. We hear your jewelry is going to be on the show. Where can people buy it? And I remember thinking, oh, well, people can buy it on my website. And they're like, okay. And I hang up the phone and I look to my coworkers and I'm like, hey, I think I need to build a website right now. That is the story.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I just we're from DC, like born and raised, and so like the way in which like those things happen is so different. And I love the LA way of like, oh, I was just getting my matcha latte. Yeah. I think it's so cool, but I love that. There's so many parts of that I just want to like feather out and celebrate, because in one vein, yes, this kind of moment happened for you, but it's also like the courage to feel like, I have something, it may just be something small. It may be just a hobby right now, but I do have something and it is valuable. It is special. And I can have the courage to like, go and to share what I've done with somebody and to send it to them, no strings attached, and just see what happens. And I think so many people, are afraid of like exposing themselves that way. Like they have a dream or they have a vision, but it's really hard to get to a place where you act on that and you take a risk. And
I agree. People are afraid of that rejection, but you don't know the answer until you take that first step. You don't really know what the answer is until you do it. And I think, for me, back then it was a mixture of, not knowing any better, right, as well as confidence, right, and but also again I think that curiosity of like, well, what would they say? What is the response? I'm not even sure if this is how you do it, but why not? I didn't know any better, but at the same time, there was a curiosity of like, well, why not? Why can't I do this? Let's see what happens.
Absolutely. I think curiosity is such a cure-all for so many things in life. I mean, to have a curious spirit, it makes you into somebody who can almost do just about anything. Because if you have the desire to understand something and to learn something, then you have the courage to take a risk and to do it. But it starts with that curiosity. And I think that's why we do what we do here. We're just curious. We just want to know. We just do.
And you'll never know someone's story until you ask that question, right? So I love that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, it just makes life richer. Let's be curious, So, Jilene.
Yeah. And I think it's also great that you were recognized for your work, that someone mentioned what you were doing to a newspaper. I think that's also really important as artists, that part of like good, like culture care for individuals who create culture and create art is to care for those individuals well. And I think that was caring for you well by, giving you the credit that you deserve when they asked, where were these things created? How can we get more of what you have created, to enjoy more of what you've created? So I think that's also important as well, that if you're an individual who is a person of influence or have a platform and you are enjoying someone's creativity and art, to do a really good job of giving that person the credit that's due.
Yeah, don't just consume, but also like give people credit and inform others. I wanted to know also, so what is your process like working with TV designers? Like, do you like, we watch Riverdale, we watch Bold Type, we watch pretty much everywhere your jewelry is.
Yeah, literally, those are our shows. We love the Bold Type.
We are the Bold Type.
We are the Bold Type. I love that you said that. Yeah. We're huge fans of Riverdale. We just got done watching Little Fires everywhere. Really impressed with what Kerry Washington and Reese Witherspoon have brought, and even just the power behind the message behind the story. And even I think Kerry Washington has even been doing some like fireside chats actually to incorporate more discussion about some of the heavy themes in the show. But you're like on all of the shows that we watch, and I just love it.
And what's amazing is like how your jewelry, it's not taking away from the character, and they're wearing your things, and it's a part of their outfit and their costume that makes who they are more believable or desirable or whatever
Absolutely.
the character needs. But it's not so much like taking away, and I'm never like distracted by it, but I'm always admiring like, oh, she turned her ear and those earrings, that's a really beautiful piece. So what is that like? Do you curate pieces for shows? Do you just send what you have? Or is there a way that you're working with the costumer to design that character and what they might wear?
Mm-hmm. All good questions. And I just want to touch back on what you were talking about earlier, where it's like so many moments of generosity afforded to me that has, given me all these opportunities. It wouldn't have happened without Cynthia Bergstrom, the first costume designer, giving my name to the reporter. Like nothing would have happened without that. And I've seen that over and over again. And people have been so generous, so hopefully I can give back in some way. Hopefully I have given back in the same ways. But yeah, absolutely. Like creative people not being afraid to talk about other creative people has been really important to where I am now. And I'm super grateful. And a lot of these shows early on, there's a lot of word of mouth. Like people just heard from Cynthia and other costume. She would give my name to other costume designers and they would contact me. Everybody's process is different, and I cannot take credit for the jewelry looking good on these characters. That has everything to do with the costume designers. Sometimes shows will, if I contact usually I'm a fan of these shows too. These are shows that I watch, and usually it's like, oh my gosh, I love this show. I have to try and find out who the costume designer is and get my stuff there. And I try and pick shows that aesthetically, are going to be a fit. Like I wouldn't necessarily try and send my show to Dallas or something like that, or something that's using a lot of fine jewelry or something that's not my zone. But I'll contact a costume designer and I really work with what their process is. A lot of the shows I can just say, hey, I'm willing to send you a box and you send back whatever you don't need. And then I curate sort of a box for the show. I've had instances where costume designers have asked me like, hey, we're really looking for a small, delicate earring. Can you show me some examples and can you get it to me tomorrow? and those are the things that I've been able to do. Specifically for Little Fires Everywhere, Lynn Paulo, emailed me and was like, hey, I'm doing this show. It's set in the 90s. Do you have anything that will fit that? And I said, sure, I think I do. And she gave me a character breakdown. And I've done that a few times too, where costume designers send an actual character breakdown. So it'll be like this person's, a lawyer in a corporate office. Her sister is a little more boho chic, and you get these breakdowns. And so I've been able to sort of put together pieces based on that. It's all different, and that makes it really fun as well. But most of the time, they'll choose pieces off the website. They'll make their own selects, or I will put together a box and send it to them, and they'll get to sort of review all the pieces and send back whatever they don't need.
That's great. And yeah, and I remember when we talked to Jolie Andriata, who did costume designing for Suits and Pearson. Mm-hmm. And she told us like, yeah, everybody's process is different, and it can be very random how people, develop costume for each character. And I'm sure it is a great challenge for you, like however it comes to you, whether it's like you curate a box, and which I think is so interesting because you're really trying to interpret the character breakdown and really kind of decide like what you have would most reflect that character versus also just maybe getting more specific instructions from somebody or just sending things along and, let me know what you like, let me know what you don't. I'm sure it's a great challenge for you, however it comes.
Yeah, definitely. It's a challenge, and that makes it fun. And yeah, it's been great. And I love TV, so it's fun to feel like a little bit, a tiny bit part of that process.
Oh my God, I'm sure that's so incredible for you when you watch your show. Like,
yeah,
it's amazing.
And I would just love to just live vicariously like through you as an individual who like loves psychology and also loves storytelling. Like breaking down a character is so much fun. And to think about what that character would wear, how they would express themselves with jewelry, I think is just the most fun work.
And I usually do not know in advance what they use. So it's always a surprise and interesting to see what pieces they choose at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how people interpret like what you do.
Right.
That's a really interesting part of art. Yeah.
Are there any new shows coming up where we can catch a glimpse of your work?
Well, I think the second half of the current season of The Bold Type will start airing soon. I think they had a couple episodes. Yay, a couple episodes left. And so I think some of my jewelry will appear there because of what's happening in the world, the pandemic. As you know, production came to a halt. So it's hard to say what's going to come up after that. Sure.
Yeah. It's a really, it's a hard time for everyone. And I think it's really interesting that, production in LA and on some of these shows and things that we love that are so much a part of our like cultural behavior, we gather around these stories, and with production stopping on so many of them, it's, it's really interesting to see like as artists, how people will pivot and how we'll move through this time. And even in some of the acting classes I've taken or casting directors I've spoken with, people are really trying to figure out how they pivot and how they move forward. But I think one thing is for sure that as creative people, we always find a way, we always find a way to do what we love because the culture needs it and people need it. And so excited to see your work on The Bold Type. We're so excited to just watch The Bold Type. So really grateful for that. And for anyone listening, if you're a fan of the show, be on the lookout for Peggy's stuff.
I don't know if you two have watched Dead to Me on Netflix.
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
That's a good show too. It's a really dark comedy. I don't even know if you'd call it comedy, like a dark drama. Christina Applegate and Linda Cardellini. And check it out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll do. Love both of them. So I'll have to, where is that? Is that on a streaming?
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Okay. We'll have to put that on our list.
For sure.
We have a roster.
I'm sure. There's so much content.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Like, how do you see Peggy Li Creations growing and evolving, or even just like, how do you see yourself kind of growing and evolving?
It's a constant challenge to stay in your business, right? I think I constantly struggle with feeling like, okay, I'm okay where I am, or should I be growing? Should I be bigger? I think when people see it from the outside, they go, oh my gosh, you have all these placements, you must be a really big business. And it's like, no, it's actually still really small. And I control, I'm doing everything on my own pretty much. So I struggle with that sometimes, right? Like this feeling of like, oh man, it should be more than what it is. But at the same time, I think I'm continuing to find challenges within it. Mm-hmm. And I think as long as I'm able to do that, then it's what I want.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. And I think even just like the intention behind asking that for me was just to see like how do you feel about that? Because I think as creative people, there's always that kind of like back of your head voice, like, could you be doing more? Like, should you be doing more? Or maybe that's a female thing. I don't know.
I feel like it's kind of a female thing.
Yeah, or maybe it's a bit of both. But I love that we're in a space and time, whereas women and as creative people, we decide what and who we are and how we are evolving. And it doesn't have to be this big thing you're doing. It doesn't have to stay small. It's like whatever is bringing you joy and allowing you to live your best life. And, people who love what you do and love what you make will always be like for you and will support your work. And so that frees you up to just then go at whatever pace makes sense. So, yeah.
I think one of the challenges of not being sort of a retail store or bigger is that, I already work in isolation, and now we're even in more isolation. So it's another challenge for me is always trying to stay connected, trying to stay connected to community, to the customers, as well as to other artists and other business people, and to try and give back as well as support other businesses and stay connected in that way. So I don't be too much in my own bubble. So I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me. It's been great.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And thank you for sharing us in your stories and just like being committed to supporting like other, Black creatives and Black businesses and other people of color. And it means like so much to both of us. And just as people of color in general, I love us and I love what we do and how we do what we do. And so it's like our pleasure to just be able to, for people in our world to know who Peggy Li is, because it matters a lot to us, for people to know like what your story is as an Asian woman, as a designer, as a person, as a creative, it's so important for us to kind of, move beyond what we're comfortable with and what we know, and to explore other people's stories and journeys.
I want to see your guys' stories up on the site. I don't think I saw full profiles of you on there. I want to hear those stories as well.
I think we have an about us, but it's so hard writing those things. You're so much more than just the couple sentences that you try to come up with to give people a glimpse of who you are. And I think we're excited for just the moments that will come where we'll be able to share more of ourselves and our stories. And I know that we were just in LA in February, like right before COVID shut down. And I was doing some acting things. And so when we come back to LA, like hopefully when all this is over, like it'd be great just to get some coffee and just talk or, be able to share our story more. And, I think we always, as creative people, like we yearn for those conversations, and growing up in DC and living in the shadow of the empire, as it were. It can be hard. It can be isolating.
Even finding creative community.
Yeah, it's here, but it's not like what New York and LA is. So it's even more of a privilege for us to talk to you because it satiates that need for us.
I'm actually in San Francisco, so I'm away from LA now.
Okay.
And I thought that was actually a really hard transition to move away from LA. San Francisco is a different beast, but it's apples and oranges. I don't think you can really compare. But again, with today's world, with podcasters and websites and the internet, it's like how to use these tools to continue to connect, I think is really important. So there are ways to get it done, and it's hard to find a community that really works, and I'm still looking, right? Still trying to find places that feel right, but I believe they're out there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much for just being part of the Storied Life community and just sharing with our readers what your journey and what your story has been. It's been really just inspiring to just hear more about you and more about your design work. And so just to kind of finish off our conversation today, if you can just let the Storied Life readers know where they can find you or where they can find your jewelry.
Sure. Thank you so much. You can find my website at peggyli.com, which is PEGGYLI.com. And I'm PLC Peggy on Instagram.
Okay, perfect. And also for our listeners, Peggy is offering 20% off any order at peggyli.com using the code SLIFE20. And that code is good through the end of June. And also because for those that are being disproportionately affected by COVID, Peggy is donating 25% of sales from the purchase of her Weather the Storm necklace to the World Central Kitchen. And all of this information will be linked in this feature and also across our socials. Peggy, again, it was such a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for joining us, for sharing your creative journey and just the story behind Peggy Li and Peggy Li Creations.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.